Good evening, and welcome to the Westwood Public Library. My name is Tricia London. I'm a librarian, and I am thrilled to have with us Meghan Joyce Tozer. Let's have a round of applause for Meghan. So I'm going to read the official biography found on Meghan's wonderful website. I highly suggest you go there. You're going to learn a lot about her and about the book, but she wrote that she is a writer, a music historian, a lyric soprano, and a filmmaker. And she grew up right here in Westwood, Massachusetts. And she graduated from Westwood High. So after earning a BA from Harvard in 2008, she moved to California to pursue her master's in music and voice performance, and then a PhD in musicology from UC Santa Barbara. And she lives and writes among the redwoods. You can tell she's an author the way she writes her bio, huh? Isn't that great? In San Francisco's East Bay with her husband, her two beautiful young children. I added the beautiful part. And her dog, Philip. You didn't include Philip's name, so I made sure. So that's the official biography, but I would like to add a little biography of my own. I've actually known Meghan since she was 5. The Joyces and we're the Londons, we lived in Braintree. And my Alex and Brian Joyce, who is Meghan's little brother, were BFFs when they were 3. And Alex really wanted to go to Brian Joyce's birthday party in the worst way. It was March, and there was a blizzard. And I had no desire to go anywhere to these people that I did not know. A lot of people didn't show up, but we did. Okay, we trudged across, and we knocked at the door, and the big flakes, it was like super dramatic. And this man opened the door wearing an eye patch and a pirate hat. And I knew I had found my people. So, if we look at, I want to show you what Meghan Joyce looked like when she was 5 years old, dressed as a pirate. Because Meghan and Katie, her older sister, were there to help the little kids color and get their pirate ships ready. Of course, Meghan's mother is Mary Joyce, Dr. Mary Joyce, kindergarten teacher extraordinaire, so it was, you know. Here we go. Okay. So enough about her early life. Let's talk about the book.
Thanks. Thank you for that awesome introduction. And thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. It means the world to me to see so many of you here. I, as Tricia said, was raised in Westwood. I went to Sheehan and Thurston and graduated from Westwood High. And a lot of you in this room have showed up and supported me through graduation parties and creative endeavors, singing, performing on stage. Back in 2016, when I published my middle school diary as the Unslut Project. Over there, a lot of you came to the book launch and the party and supported me even though I was writing under a pen name. So I appreciate you all coming out and talking about my debut novel. I plan to write more fiction, and so I hope this is just the first of a bunch of visits back to this library.
Yay. So I thought first we could kind of talk about plot spoilers. This is such a good book. This was one of those, I read it in 2 sittings, couldn't put it down, and there are twists and turns. So we are hoping that as you ask Meghan questions, no plot spoiling, okay? Raise your right hand and solemnly swear. Okay. So, speaking of plot, can you tell us first what came chicken or egg? Was it the plot or was it the characters, or what's your writing process?
For this book, I started in 2017. I had just given birth to my daughter, my oldest child. She's 5 now, and I was going through what I now know in hindsight was postpartum depression. But at the time, I just felt really frustrated and angry and at my wit's end. And the way that I coped was by journaling through it. I have done that my whole life. So I was just writing down everything that I wouldn't have said out loud to anyone at the time. And I did that for a few months, and then it became November. I gave birth at the end of July. It came to be November. My sister, as you know, is an elementary school teacher, and she told me about National Novel Writing Month, which, has anyone heard of NaNoWriMo? Yes. Some of you have, yeah. In the library here, I know that they do a NaNoWriMo kind of community project. The idea is that you write a whole novel over the course of 1 month just by committing to about 1,500 to 1,600 words a day. And that was how I thought I would regain my sense of identity as a person who was also a mother and not just a mother, and as someone who kind of was productive and could do what I knew I loved to do, which was write. And I did. I cranked out the first draft in a month, and I put it up on a platform called Wattpad, which is a social media writing and reading platform online. And people can comment and give you feedback and ask questions. And so I was able to rework it and turn it into another draft, similar but with a lot of changes. And then a few years later, W by Wattpad Books, their new publishing company, they just decided to launch an adult publishing company. They had already been doing YA, asked me if I would be in their first slate of books that they would publish. And that was fantastic, because then I was able to take Night Forgotten, which had been drafted in a month, and exactly 5 years later, on November 1st, 2022, it was published in its final version as a book, which felt really wonderful. It felt like an awesome catharsis and a way to channel what had been a depressed period of my life into something that feels like the start of a new career.
I love the beginning. I was wondering if we could ask you just to read a couple of lines and then kind of talk about how one starts a novel.
I'll read, if you don't mind, I'll read the first part of the first chapter, first page and a half or so.
Great.
Chapter 1. I watch my body giving birth from the outside. The obstetrician's hands reach into the cavern of my torso, which is pinned open like a science project. My husband, Owen, sits on a low stool next to my head. He stares at my closed eyelids. With his wavy blonde hair trapped beneath a creased hospital cap, and sweat soaking into the neckline of his hastily donned scrubs, Owen looks like a character in a soap opera. Paler, though. In fact, he's much paler than usual. His jaw is visibly tense. I want to hold his face in my hands and thank him for still being awake beside me after everything that's happened, but my hands won't move. A blue curtain hangs perpendicular to the horror show of my open abdomen. It's meant to shield Owen's eyes mercifully from this new angle of my senseless body, in case he looks away from my face. He doesn't. From above, though, I see everything. I try to scream, "Wake up, put my body back together." They must have given me the good drugs, because despite my efforts, nothing happens. No one in the room reacts to me. In addition to Owen on the stool and the surgeon, whom I don't recognize, 4 or 5 youngish people in scrubs, medical students probably, gather in the corner near the door. One of them keeps twisting his shoulders away from the operating table in brief, nauseated jerks. Several assistants deliver tools or directions, type at computers sitting on rolling desks, and yank ream after ream of paper from humming monitors. 2 nurses with pinched foreheads flank the doctor, who cups the baby above my open body. The baby is purple, silent. A hush falls over the operating room and smothers the passage of time. Everyone pools their breath for the sake of the new life among us, collectively inhaling and holding, until we can be sure the baby has gotten the air it needs. Finally, a whine escapes from its impossibly tiny body. The doctor hands the baby, a slimy fledgling person, to one of the waiting nurses to be cleaned, measured, incubated. Owen's head snaps up. His gaze darts from my face to that of my son. As he watches the baby, I recognize the emotion in his eyes. Anger. That's all.
Ooh. Okay, you read that, you have to finish it. You do? Dave, funny you said that, so I'll buy it. You may have noticed there are snacks, which Meghan and Mary and John brought, and the books will be for sale at the end of the evening, and Meghan will sign. So can you talk to us about how you start a book? Revisions, was that originally the beginning, or?
No.
Yeah, okay, tell us.
It originally started with the car crash. So there's a moment in the book where there's a life or death situation, a near-death experience, I'll say. And its inspiration was a near-death experience that I had myself. And that was how I was initially going to start the book. This doesn't give anything away, but the protagonist, Julie, is in a car accident. And when I was about 25 years old, I was in a car accident. I spun out across 6 lanes of a freeway in LA and I survived, and I was obviously survived. I was survived without a scratch.
Yay!
And and the damage to the car, was minimal. But I had an experience, which some people in this room might have had as well, which was that my brain went from shock to panic to desperation to acceptance. I had a moment of realization that I was going to die and that this was the end of my life, and that at any moment, maybe this one, maybe the next one, I all of a sudden everything would be for me exactly like it was before I was born. That's how it felt. And I was just waiting for it. And I don't know how long it lasted, probably just a couple of seconds, but having had my brain go to that point, that experience, I had a lot of trauma after. It's kind of textbook PTSD after a near-death experience in a car accident like that, where rainy days in cars I would avoid driving, or right when I was about to fall asleep, I would be jerked awake by this scary feeling that I was going to be in a car crash. And that trauma that was not rare. It's incredibly common to have a car accident or a near-death experience. I felt that was a key to something, even if readers had never been in Julie's specific situation, which I hope no one in this room ever will be, they would have something to relate to, this fear of that moment right before you die that you know it's going to happen. To me, that's one of the scariest and kind of most common, universal human fears.
Wow. Okay, that's heavy. Let's go a little lighter. Meghan, we have prepared some Meghan trivia for our audience at home.
This is lighter.
I have known you since you were 5. Okay. All right, so we're going to skip through that part. Okay, Meghan trivia. So, in addition to being a writer, music historian, filmmaker, and a lyric soprano, Meghan was also a nanny to this famous person. We have Dancing with the Stars, and we have Zombies 1, 2, and 3. All right, Eddie Metzel, come on. No? Yeah, Milo, yes, Milo. Okay, and last name, Milo? Woohoo! Yay! All right. Meghan, can you tell us the connection?
Sure. I think his mother, Cameron Manheim, might be better well known in this room. She was in Law and Order, and she was.
I know, but he's cute. You know,
he's adorable. For a year, I lived with this now man after college, and yeah, we sang, we danced around the house, and it wasn't. I guess I was about 5 years ago. He called and said, "I'm going to be Dancing with the Stars. You got to watch it." And I was like, "What, as a star? Who are you? What have you done that's a star? Your mom's just an actress." And he's like, "I did the Zombies movies." I was like, "What?" So then I had to look it up. And I'm not a very good fan, but yeah.
All right, so you actually taught him to dance as his nanny, right? Royalties.
Yes, for the record, yes. I do.
Okay, that's great. Okay, we're doing great. Question number 2. All right, this is not Meghan's first book. The title of her previous book and film was Unslut. The pseudonym she used was... So, well done. Say it louder.
Emily Linden.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay. So, can you explain about Unslut, please?
Yes. This is one of the reasons it's so meaningful for me to come here to Westwood and to talk to people in this community. It's because the first book that I published was back in 2016. It was called Unslut, A Diary and a Memoir. And it was my middle school diary, word for word, from when I had been at Thurston Middle School and had gone through puberty sooner than most of my classmates, so had been labeled the school slut, which I put in very big scare quotes. And that time of my life lasted for a few years. Then I graduated high school, went to college, and moved out to California. And I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about middle school, as most of us don't. But when I was writing, had just started writing my dissertation at UC Santa Barbara, and I read a newspaper article about a girl named Rehtaeh Parsons who had been living in Nova Scotia and had gone through something similar. And instead of overcoming it, she had taken her own life. And as soon as I read that story, I started reading and noticing other stories, and that it was still a pretty common phenomenon that young girls especially, but people of all genders, would be sexually harassed from a young age, labeled in this way, and reduced to kind of an idea of a woman that doesn't even exist. And I thought the best and kind of most honest, authentic way to participate in that conversation was to just take my diary from when I had gone through that and put it up on Tumblr, which is where I put it. And eventually it got over to Wattpad, which is the same platform where I put Night Forgotten. Wattpad has a readership of a lot of teenage girls and preteen girls, and so my experience was I put my diary up online and just thought it would be a quirky blog where maybe a few teenage girls who needed to might find it and know they weren't alone. But people who weren't teenagers, people of all ages, all different generations, started reaching out to me. It was really like I had opened up the floodgates. This was pre-Me Too going viral. And so simultaneously, Tarana Burke and the Me Too movement were kind of building momentum. And people were realizing that if you have been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted, it's not something that's your shame to carry. It's something you can speak of openly and make a part of your story in a way that feels good to you. And so putting out my diary online, eventually I was able to publish it as a book. And that's that book over there, Unsled, a Diary and a Memoir. And realizing that my experience was so rare. I mean, having the parents I had, having the community and the resources that I had to direct me toward academics and singing and things that could make me feel good about myself and help me overcome that type of bullying was really not the case for most of the girls that I spoke to and learned from. And so making a documentary film was a way to share not just my story, but a bunch of different stories. And that film gained a lot of attention in part because the victim of Roman Polanski, whose name is Samantha Geimer, reached out to me and wanted to participate. And so we were really able to scan what happened to her in the 70s when she had been a preteen, sexually assaulted by a famous director, and the media slut-shamed her, all the way to 2013, right about the time the film came out, when teenage girls were being slut-shamed and bullied by adults in their lives and their classmates. So I used a pseudonym. That's all to say, putting my diary in the world, I realized, oh my gosh, if I'm typing up my classmates' names, they're gonna recognize themselves. And a lot of these people were bullies when they're 12, myself included in a lot of ways, and now are awesome people, productive members of society. I don't want to drag their names through the mud. So I changed their names and realized that I had to change my own so people wouldn't recognize themselves in my diary. But it feels so much better to be writing under my legal name and to be here just as myself and not kind of using a pseudonym to speak publicly.
So can I give a little push for Canopy, which is an online streaming services that we offer at the Westwood Public Library. There's a QR code right over there. You download the app and you can download Unslut, the documentary, and everybody in the room can because it's simultaneous use, so it's not like a library book where you have to wait. So if you want to learn more, will help you learn to use Canopy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we have one more question. So while she was still in high school, Meghan became the youngest member ever of this prestigious chorus. I sort of put the answer up in the top. It was late. I was tired. Yeah.
But the trivia needed to be made.
It did.
Yeah.
All right, so here's another trivia question. So Meghan also sang locally besides, musicals with Bay Colony, with Eddie over there, and she was a soloist at which church in Norwood? Begins with, no, you went there for a while. Oh, she knows, Colleen Grad. Very good, and Colleen was her boss. She's the director of liturgy there. Oh, There you go. Okay. And, oh, the final one. So this picture was taken when Meghan went to Barnes & Noble for a book signing this past weekend, and two very special Westwood High teachers who influenced Meghan were, if you're sitting up front, you can probably read it up there. So can you talk about returning home to Westwood and connecting with old teachers? Not old teachers, but former teachers. Let me clarify.
Every novel, you might have noticed, often I don't read them, but now I will. They'll have a section at the back that's acknowledgments. And once you realize you're getting a book published, writing the acknowledgement section is a lot of fun because I realized how many people had made me a writer, who had helped me, kind of convinced me that I could publish a book, that it's something that I could do. And Ms. Kelsch, Stephanie, and Wayne Chatterton, it's very hard to call them by the first names, because they were my teachers, came out to support me, and it just made me feel so great. I thanked them in the acknowledgments. I also, Cara Guthrie-Blade is in the room today, and my mom and dad are here as well. My mom's filming. They also are in the acknowledgments of the book, in part for just supporting me, but also for reading drafts along the way and giving me feedback. So I feel like thanking my English teachers, it's kind of expected, but these two in particular were really changed the way that I approached communicating. Stephanie Kelsch teaches oral English as well, and she's just a gem. I think now she's a reverend at a church in Hingham.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that it was fun writing the acknowledgments. Yeah. Can you tell us what other parts of the book was like the most fun to write?
The research that I did going out to the Berkshires, when I cranked out this draft in a month, I just chose a setting kind of out of thin air, Providence, Rhode Island. And then when I went back and rewrote it, I thought, why would I choose Providence? I want to make the setting a character in the book. I want to choose somewhere I know that I can really incorporate into what's happening. And nothing against Providence, I'm sure I could have said it there, but the Berkshires, you mentioned that I had been a member of the Tanglewood Festival Chorus. And so all through high school and college, my family and I would spend at least a couple of weeks out in Tanglewood and Lenox. And in the concerts I wasn't singing, I could have lawn tickets and sit and listen to the music coming out of the Kusevitsky shed, and it was just a magical place. And so going back there to do the research for this book, which is set in Lee, it felt like an excuse to go back to the Berkshires. The Airbnb that I rented there was definitely haunted. I arrived in the middle of the night and felt like, oh my gosh, they haven't renovated this granary since 1735. The upstairs where I was staying was nice. It was an Airbnb. They wanted good reviews. But downstairs was definitely haunted. And when I mentioned it to them, I got in late to the owner of the Airbnb, and the first thing he said was, "Did you meet the ghost?" And I'm not sure I did, but I definitely, over the course of this day, I talked to the ghost, just to be safe. So just better safe than sorry.
The ghost.
Oh, yeah. If you've read the book, you would recognize the story of Pamela Dwight Sedgwick. And if you do read the book, you'll, when you get to that story, and also there's a couple of other ghost stories in there. They're real. I went to the Berkshires and went to the Sedgwick house. It's currently occupied, so I kind of had to creep around and take pictures, so find out where Pamela Dwight Sedgwick's bedroom had been, and the whole story, her whole story, and about Mum Bet as well, is all true. And the Hoosick Tunnel, this is an excerpt from the book, when the protagonist Julie and her friend Liza are at the Hoosick Tunnel. I was poking around to take these pictures. I had heard there were some legends about when it had been built. And while I was there, I was surprised by a voice just over my shoulder asking, "What are you looking for? What are you doing here?" And it was a woman named Robin Spooner, who was a trans veteran, and she was mining around there, just kind of spending the afternoon looking for whatever she could find, and showed me around. She said, "This is the memorial for the people who were killed in the explosion." And so then I had to ask her, "What explosion? What are you talking about?" And she told me all these ghost stories. So I incorporated one of them into the book, and that was definitely the most fun part, I think, doing the research.
Research, yay. Okay, So one of the questions I was planning on asking you was, you told us when you wrote in November. Where a writer writes is always fascinating to me. I think it's cool. But when I checked, I think it was one of your Instagram reels, there is some sort of construction of some sort of writing, and you and your mom had another field trip. Can you talk about that? No, she has such good stories.
Well, we're building an addition on my home because I don't have a place to write. And I have 2 young kids, and I didn't think I would need a place to write. I thought, oh, while they're in school or while they're doing other activities, I'll just, in a 20-minute section here or an hour there. But the way that my life works and the way that I work, it was impossible for me. I need a space where I can go and shut the door, and preferably shut more than one door. When my parents were visiting me, we went to Eugene O'Neill's estate, which is in Danville or Alamo, right near where I live in Walnut Creek, California. And it's where he wrote his most famous plays and lived with his 3rd wife and a staff. And there was a rule when he was writing in his room. You had to, every time you got to a door and made the decision to open it, you had to decide if it was really worth it to go disturb Eugene O'Neill while he was writing his play. And so his writing room, his office, was beyond. First you had to go up the stairs, open a door, go down a hallway, open another door, go through his bedroom, open another door, go through his closet. Finally, I think there was even a bathroom. At any rate, you finally got to his inner lair where he was writing, and I was so inspired that I decided that's what we do on my edition. We were trying to figure out a way to have 2 home offices in a way that would make it practical, and I thought, what if mine was through the bathroom? And so the way we've designed it is, in order to disturb Mom when she's working, you have to decide every time you open the door, do I really have to go upstairs? Do I really have to go through Mom's bedroom? Do I really have to go through her bathroom? Do I really have to open the secret door on the other side of the bathtub? And that's how you'll get to my writing room. And it's almost done. It's almost done. I think when I get back, it'll be just about completed.
Okay, I am officially inviting Meghan back when the 2nd novel comes out, because we need pictures. That sounds great. So, speaking of 2nd novel, can you tell us what's in the works?
Yeah, speaking of research, I'm in the process right now of fleshing out the bones of the 2nd novel. I will say, before I found out I was going to have this book published, I wrote a draft of a 2nd novel, just to kind of take a break from trying to publish this one. I thought, I'll go into the woods for a week and I'll write a draft of another book, and then I'll focus on that instead. And while I was working on that draft, things were happening I didn't know, because the day I got back, I got a phone call, literally the day I got back, that said from W by Wattpad Books that they wanted to publish Night Forgotten, which makes me feel like I manifested that just by putting it aside and going and focusing on writing my 2nd novel. So now that I've told you how much I love research, that's what I'm currently doing for the 2nd novel. It's going to be, right now the working title is Give Us Your Baby, and it's going to be about the baby scoop era between the end of World War II and the passage of Roe v. Wade in 1973, when a lot of unmarried young women were told their only option was to go through pregnancy and childbirth and then give the baby to a family that was deemed more fit to raise a baby. So there was a really good book that came out in 2006, which I recommend, by Anne Fessler. It's not a fiction, it's a nonfiction book, and she had gone through something similar, discovering her own birth mother and putting together her family history. And it inspired me. So it's similar themes with intergenerational trauma and things that are often unspoken about motherhood and the relationship between mothers and their children, but kind of a different direction.
Okay. Well, I highly recommend that you follow Meghan on social media, because as wonderful as her stories are here, she tells great stories on social media as well. So can you, Instagram and
Instagram
TikTok?
is the best place.
Yeah.
I'm not yet on TikTok. My publisher,
Yeah.
W by Wattpad Books, made a TikTok for me. But I do Instagram, at Meghan Joyce Tozer. And that, if you find me on Instagram, I would love to be in touch. And if you read Night Forgotten, feel free to take a picture of it and post it, because social media does a great job spreading the word. I've been so surprised at almost every event I've gone to. Some people have said, oh yeah, we just found it on Instagram and we came. I said, great, awesome. I didn't realize. I thought I was just kind of doing that for my own entertainment, but great.
Okay, another ad. So
Oh, yeah.
Meghan is incredibly generous. If you look up here, And you have a book club, and there are lots of different book clubs in Westwood. So you can invite her to your book club, and she offers a free 20-minute virtual chat. So, keep that in mind. And she's got a website and social media, and you can find her. And so you can have more conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean to.
No.
I
Keep
wanted
going.
to just invite people, too, to ask some questions in a group setting, if you can do so without spoilers.
That's where we are right now.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the book's about?
Yeah. It's a psychological thriller that pushes the boundaries of that genre. There is a spooky twist, and it deals with the family of a sexual assault survivor, and all of the aftermath that results from a pregnancy that was the result of a sexual assault. It's very sensitively written. It's informed by all of the activist work that I did through the Unslut Project. So as I mentioned, I was talking about my own experience in middle school, and for about 3 or 4 years, I traveled around North America to universities and high schools, libraries, community centers like this, speaking as Emily Linden about sexual assault prevention and sexual harassment prevention and kind of healing as a community. And almost every time, there was a whole line of people waiting to just share with me the most traumatic thing that had ever happened to them. And I wasn't really prepared to hear all that. To be honest, I didn't have any training as a psychologist or a counselor, and it weighed on me. It was really very troubling to suddenly understand just how much so many people have been through and are coping with. And so writing this novel, when I mention that it's about sexual assault and surviving that and all of the different repercussions and how it plays out in different people's lives related to the survivor, I want to make clear that it's not intended to be triggering or sensational. I feel like the work and the experience that I have informed it to make it quite accurate and authentic.
Authentic, good word. Well done.
Yeah.
I'm curious if anybody reached out to you at the Unslut that was from Westwood. Maybe that was either a bully or not a bully, after the fact on that.
Yes, they sure did. As I mentioned, I had changed my name to Emily Linden. I had published the Unslut Project with a pseudonym. And because it gained national attention and I was speaking about it on TV, and a few different people saw my face with the chyron below it, Emily Linden, took a screenshot and sent it to me and said, "This person looks exactly like you." So the jig was up. Yeah, and luckily, actually I heard from some of the people who featured most heavily in the book as bullies at the time. Some of them were going through really upset. I mean, they were 10 and 11-year-old kids who were coping with really upsetting home lives. And so being able to talk to them in our 30s and go over the events that I wrote about in my diary and the way that they processed it was really healing. It was really, I was at first nervous when I realized, oh my gosh, this is getting national attention. What if someone realizes this is me? But then I'm so glad that they did, because it healed those relationships. And I think they got something good out of that connection too.
Who are your favorite novelists right now? Let's say people who've published books in the last 20 years.
Oh, Barbara Kingsolver is definitely one of my favorites, but I haven't read Demon Copperhead yet. That's on my list. I'd say Mary Kubica. I really like her thrillers and the pacing of them.
Yeah.
This author I read in middle school and high school and have just reread, I would say Paulo Coelho. He's on Wattpad as well, so it feels a little bit like a plug, but he, the way that he mixes poetry into the novel, I think is really, has stuck with me. It's one of those authors that I've read, The Alchemist when I was 12 and read it again. Thank you for sharing that. Your response is what I always say. I'll often say, what do you mean by that? And just kind of wait. And the more questions you ask, it unravels. I'm so glad. That makes me feel really good that that inspired you to go out in the world, and hopefully he doesn't call his daughter that again. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. I was so fascinated by the detail in which you wrote your middle school diary. I mean, I tried to keep a diary. I would do it for 3 days, then I stopped. And you did it for years.
Yeah.
So, did you have family members who wrote diaries? Where did you even think of deciding to do this? And what kept you so committed to doing it? Which is unusual for someone of that age.
It is. That was one of the reasons I felt compelled to share it, because I thought this is a really rare piece of primary source material. My mother has always recorded, she'll write down almost every day, just at least a few sentences about what happened that day. And I watched her growing up be able to reflect back and compare the things that we had done 5 years before to the things we were doing on the same day now. And that always really inspired me. I was always interested in documenting my life. I watched Harriet the Spy and loved the idea of kind of watching people and writing down my observations about them. And that type of observant and, yeah, really this urge to document everything, in part because I felt so lonely. I didn't have very many people that I could really talk to about what was going on, and so, and I was also grounded a lot at the time. That was my parents' punishment of choice, and I deserved it. So I would be up in my room alone a lot, and there was no social media. I didn't have a TV in my room. I would have been pretty bored if I didn't write. So I think I really did pass hours a day trying to process everything that was happening to me, and I wrote a lot of fiction too.
Just as a mother, as Meghan's mother, I'd just like to say that I saved lots of her papers, and this trip that she's been home now has given us a chance to just have her without her children and her husband. And I dragged out a lot of those things that I saved. And she has journals from like when she was 5 years old, and we tried to figure out what she was actually saying, what she was actually writing. And one common thing that she asked for was a dog, and we never had a dog. It just kept coming up.
Oh yeah, that was the right.
It made me feel so guilty as a mother. I really want a dog.
Every single entry was like, "Dear diary, I hope today I'll have a golden retriever. Maybe today there will be a puppy waiting for me." Every single day for years. Never happened.
great.
I have a dog now. It's all right, Mom. It's all right.
Philip came through. But when we were building a house at Chase Estates, we were always at Home Depot, always. And Meghan would have her journal, and she would just like sit and just start writing about whoever was sitting near her or buying something near her. And one time a man came up to her and said, "You've been following me around the store. What are you doing?" And she was just, writing.
Just a creepy kid.
She was in voice acting.
Yeah.
So it's in the first person, and I'm not a writer, so I'm always curious what makes someone decide. First person, narrator, whatever they all are, actually.
Right.
And would you be, is that your choice of writing, or, I mean, you do write diaries, but would you use another one?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to writing in third person or an omniscient narrator. I think it just is a different, it's a different type of framing. It's a different type of book. For this one, where we're so close to Julie and her experience and her understanding of what's happening in the now and then sections, first person just felt necessary for the reader to be pulled along as if we were experiencing it as well.
I think it sort of makes me feel closer, understand the character better when it's first person. And I do want to say I love the now and then. It just was enough to be clear and yet, not too much, but really help me follow. And I thought it was really great the way that was done.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of along those lines, what inspired you to toggle between the two timelines of now and then?
wanted readers to get to know Julie before her current situation. When I was writing the now portions, a lot of it was inspired. I mentioned I kept a journal to cope with my postpartum depression. And when I finally went back and read that, just stream of consciousness, what I was thinking, what I was trying to deal with, a lot of that inspired the now sections for Julie. But I wanted her to have a voice that was outside of that confused state. And so writing then, kind of giving her and Owen a backstory, giving her and Liza a backstory, and I wanted to, I felt I owed it to Julie as a character to let the reader get to know her when she was in her prime, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I just think you have a great wrap-up of your book. Are you getting a lot of feedback about that?
A great,
At the end of your book, how you end your book?
oh, the wrap-up, the twist?
You can't talk about it, but are you getting a lot of feedback?
Yes, I will say about the twist that whether or not you guess it, I would love for you to share on social media, not the content, but whether or not you guessed it, because that is one of the things that people have been sharing about is, I got the twist, or not, and posting.
All right, you got me. I'm a librarian. I read a lot. No, I was like all the way up to like here before I sort of figured it out.
Okay.
So, very well done. All right, you want to talk about snacks and signing and,
Yeah, we have time for a signing. That's great. I'm going to be over there, and if you have a copy of Night Forgotten, before we kind of break out and grab snacks and do signing, could we just get a picture of everyone with a copy of the book? Because there's such a great crowd. Would you mind doing that and taking a big photo?
Sounds great.
Okay, good. We can distribute books too. If you have your book, pull it out. If not, we'll just give you a copy.
Do you want to stand over there with all of them rather than them coming over here with you?
Yeah, if you stay in our seats, Tricia.
If you stay in your seats.
you can probably do better than. No, here, let me.
Perfect. Oh, thank you. There you go. Put this down too.
It matches your outfit. I'm fine. There you go. We just need Meghan.
Oh, that's a smart idea.
You can join me up there. We'll take turns, okay?
Okay, good idea.
All right, I'll go first. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, your turn. Table time. Oh yeah, get in the photo.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, can we have a giant round of applause for Meghan Tozer?
Can we say thank you to Tricia too? Thank you for organizing all this, Tricia. And I should say, if you want to purchase the book that we just handed to you, that's awesome. If you don't have one yet, I'll be over here, and we have Venmo or cash or a check, and they're just $15 here. Also, if you don't have cash or you don't want to purchase one right now, they're available anywhere you can buy books. I made a little zine with some information about my research that I did and about me and about the book. Tricia's fantastic Vanna White. Yeah. Those are free because they're just zines. So grab one, and if you feel that you would spread them around and share them with a friend, feel free to do that too. Yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, and there's a raffle. We're raffling off $25 to Barnes & Noble, so that's over on the same table where I'll be signing books. Oh yeah, grab a bookmark too.
So is